So ultimately, did you respond to the area of Cup Foods, or 30th in Chicago?
Yes.
And what did you do when you arrived there?
The rig stopped. My partner and I got off the rig, and we looked around for a patient.
And when you got there, what did you see?
There were several police squads, one Park Police, I believe, and two or three Minneapolis police cars that I remember parked in the vicinity in the area. A couple officers were standing on the street, and a handful of people were outside.
Was there an ambulance there at the time that you were there?
No, ma'am.
And were you able to identify a patient upon arrival?
No, ma'am, there was no one on the street.
So what did you do next?
I basically went clockwise around our rig. I spoke briefly with one police officer, and then we went into the store.
And did you come into contact with anybody in the store?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the nature of that? What happened in the store?
Could you be more specific, please?
Sure. Well, upon entering the store, did you interact with anybody who was in the area, who had been in the area?
Yes, ma'am. We spoke, as I said, I spoke to one police officer as I descended the rig, came around through a crowd of maybe 6 or 7 people who were at the mouth of the store and in the kind of the vestibule or entryway, and then I went into the store still looking for a patient.
Okay. So you went into the store looking for a patient. Did you have any interaction with anybody? You said there were a number of people, 6 or 7 people. Did you have an interaction with any of those people?
Ma'am, do you mean did I speak with any? I'm not sure what you mean by interaction.
Yes. Did you have a conversation with any of those people?
As I was walking through, I heard what people were saying, and then, but I was pretty much looking for a patient. I might have spoken to someone who was working there briefly. And while I was looking around for a patient, essentially on the ground, I did encounter an off-duty firefighter, and then I briefly spoke with one of the police officers who was at the back of the store.
Okay, so let's just talk about those two things. So you interacted both with an off-duty firefighter and also a law enforcement officer who was present, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's first start with your objective. You said you were looking on the floor for a patient. Was it your primary goal to find a patient?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you were not able to see one easily and entered into the store, what did you do at that point? Was that when you talked to the law enforcement officer?
I made my way back toward the back of the store looking for a patient, or the call was confusing because we did not have a lot of information. So I did not have a patient description. I did not have anything else, and so I was essentially looking on the floor for someone. And at that point, though, the crowd that through which I had walked was. People were upset, and I was getting the sense from them that there was an injured person, and that's all so I was looking for someone on the ground.
Okay. Did you find an injured person on the ground?
No, ma'am.
So what did you do next?
My partner mostly stayed and spoke with the off-duty firefighter, who was agitated to distraught. I'm not somewhere between there. She was fairly upset, and as my job as supervisor is to kind of cut through a lot of the extraneous information and find what we actually need to deal with. And so I moved to the back, and I did see the police officer at the back of the store, which would have been the southeast corner of the building, talking to one of the employees behind the barricade, and then I approached him.
Okay. And then were you directed to another location?
Right as I was asking him what was going on, he said, I believe he said the medics left, they need you. And right about simultaneously over his radio and over ours, because we have separate dispatchers, we both had the information that the paramedics needed us at a different location.
Okay. And then you also mentioned an off-duty firefighter. Do you know who that off-duty firefighter was?
Do I know who she is now?
Her name, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Genevieve Hansen.
At the time, did you have limited interaction with her?
I had worked, I'm sorry, if you're asking prior to that day?
Right. When you arrived on scene, did you immediately recognize her as somebody that you knew?
No, ma'am. I think I walked right past her, and then she popped up to my left once we were inside the store.
Okay. And then after the fact, do you now know that that was an individual that you know to work with as Genevieve Hansen?
Prior to that, once we started speaking, I did a double take, and I clocked that I knew her.
Okay.
And then we spoke.
And what information did you have at that point in terms of what was happening and what was going on?
The police officer said that the medics had left and they needed us, code 3. Dispatch said the same thing, and then from the off-duty firefighter and from the crowd, I was hearing and inferring that there was an injured man who had been sustained injuries in a scuffle with the police, or in a situation with the police.
Okay. I'm going to put up on the screen what's already been admitted as Exhibit 68. Can we put that up, please? Oh, here we go. All right. So you described your arrival. Could you just describe what's shown in Exhibit 68, please?
Yes, ma'am. That is our fire truck, engine 17. That is me stepping out from the captain's side. We are facing eastbound on 38th Street. Cup Foods is behind us. There is a squad to my forward and right from this photo to my left. And I believe that was the police officer I spoke to whose body camera that was. So I was about to make contact with him.
So does this show you upon your initial arrival at the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And if we could move to Exhibit 69, please. Did someone come off? So Exhibit 69 is now on the screen. If you could just describe who is pictured in this photo.
That is me to the right of the screen, and that is Firefighter Jennifer Hall to the left, coming around from her side of the rig. She was a rookie who started with us at the end of March.
And so were you both responding together, essentially?
Yes, ma'am. She was my partner.
Okay. Can we move to Exhibit 70, please? You described walking into the store and seeing some other individuals. Could you just describe what's shown in Exhibit 70, please?
Yes, ma'am. There's looks like a police squad ahead to my left, north on the street. I believe that might be a park police squad to my left. 4 people outside, one of whom is off-duty firefighter Hansen. I did not recognize her walking through.
Do you recognize her now?
Affirmative.
Could you just, you can use the stylus or your finger, but it's a touchscreen. If you could just indicate where she is, please, in this photo. All right, you made a green mark above where, indicating Genevieve Hansen is. Can you just indicate where you are in this photo as well? All right, and there's an arrow showing where you've just made that mark. And then, could you identify Jennifer Hall as well, please? All right, did you know any of the other individuals in this?
In this photo, no, ma'am.
And if we could move to Exhibit 71, please. I'm sorry, 72, please. All right, so did you ultimately enter the store and have a brief interaction as you described with a law enforcement officer in there?
Yes, ma'am.
And does Exhibit 72 show that? Maybe I should be more clear. What does Exhibit 72 show?
I believe it would be the body camera of the officer with whom we were speaking.
And who's pictured in this image?
I'm in the center, and Firefighter Hall is to the right.
And was this inside Cup Foods?
Yes, ma'am, towards the back of the store.
All right. And as you described, when you learned that there was no patient there, we'll go back to Exhibit 71, please. Now I've got Exhibit 71 on the screen. Did you then exit the store?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you just describe, is that what you were doing in Exhibit 71 here?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So once you had the additional information, we can take that down. Thank you. What did you do next, and where did you go?
We were directed to meet the medics at 36 on Park Avenue South. We got back on our fire truck and we responded to 36 and Park.
And what did you see when you got there?
The Hennepin County Medical Center ambulance was parked on the east side of the street, just south of 36.
And I'm going to put up Exhibit 74, which has already been admitted. Ultimately, can you just describe what point of view this is showing in Exhibit 74?
Yes, ma'am. That is not me, but this would be the view from my seat.
And so in the foreground, is that the fire truck that you were in?
I'm sorry, yes. This photo is taken from the front seat of the fire truck facing the ambulance.
And is that where your fire rig parked once you arrived at that location to meet up with the ambulance?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you do once you arrived at that location?
Again, my partner, Firefighter Hall, and I got out of the fire truck and we went into the ambulance entering from the side door.
And what did you observe at that point in time?
2 paramedics and 1 police officer and a patient on the stretcher.
What appeared to be the condition of the patient that you observed?
He was face up on the stretcher. He had an airway an advanced airway, so he had a breathing tube going into his throat. And he had the Lucas compression device, which is a CPR, kind of a pneumatic CPR device in place and working.
And when you say working, what does that mean?
It was pumping up and down to pump his chest, pump his heart.
Okay. And first of all, this patient, was he later identified by name?
Yes, ma'am. It's George Floyd.
So you said that he had an airway in place and the Lucas machine was pumping. What did you observe about his overall condition?
I mean, other than that, he was unresponsive.
Right. What, I mean, maybe not other than that, but what do you mean by unresponsive? What did you see?
A person who is not, who's, I'm sorry, it's a confusing question, I'm sorry.
Not a good question, I apologize. Just tell.
He was an unresponsive body on a cot. The airway was in place so that we could breathe for him, or so the responders could, or people could breathe for him, and the Lucas device was compressing his heart to get blood going through his body.
And when you say breathe for him, what does that mean?
I was not clear about that. And an airway device goes in through the throat, and basically gets better access into the lungs for some sort of an airway and oxygen delivery device. In our case, would be a bag valve mask, a BVM, which is like a Nerf football sized compressible bag that we squeeze every 6 seconds to bring air into their lungs, and it's oxygenated air.
So when you say breathe for him, does that imply using that BVM and actually squeezing it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, to your question, in the absence of those actions, the patient would have been pulseless and unresponsive, not breathing, and for all intents and purposes, dead.